So why don't we get started? Basically, I'm just going to cover today how I use Google Plus to facilitate collaborative work in my classes. This started at, two different points, I suppose. One, I found this tool called Google Plus that I thought had a lot of promise, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. And the other side of it was group work in my classes was terrible. And I mean that on my end. My students did the best they could, but in all of my different evaluations and my class surveys and the impromptu research I did myself, consistently, the thing that my students liked the least was the group project. And it would come back, what would you change about this class? Boo, group work. What was the weakest thing in this class? Boo, group work. I would, ask them flat out, what should I keep? What should I get rid of? Keep whatever you want, get rid of group work. The problem was I couldn't get rid of group work. It's in the 335. It's a valuable skill. They need to know how to work in a group. So I was kind of stuck with something. I had to do something. And so this is kind of a sort of a narrative about how that started, and then how I apply this technology. And then I'll give, if there's time, as in-depth of a demo as I can. It's quick, it's easy to follow, and once you get used to Google Plus, I think you'll find that it has a lot of potential, and it just requires a little bit of planning. Yes. Oh, the Adobe web address is hack.adobeconnect.com/VC site. All one thing. So here, that's our title. This, by the way, this uses Prezi. This is not actually Google Plus. That comes later. So here are the challenges that my students were reporting regarding group work. First, there was a lot of pressure. I had effectively one assignment for group work. It was worth 15% of their grade. They would go in, try to work together in a group with effectively a bunch of strangers. Most of my group work, because I teach for virtual campus, happens online, not in the classroom. So a lot of my students were reporting that they had trouble communicating. They didn't feel connected to their group members. They were using discussion boards. Internal email at this point wasn't even functioning in D2L, so they couldn't fall back on that. It was literally discussion boards, or a couple of them went out and got Skype or something to that end. And they were reporting that they just found it all around inconvenient and inefficient. It took so much time to read what other people had said, to respond to that. Then it would take the other person days to get back to them. And basically it was just like walking through mud. They just had to slog through everything. So that had to change. And I took two different approaches to this. One is philosophy. We're actually going to skip philosophy for now, but we can come back to that one at the end. For now, though, we're concerned with the technology. Right? My philosophy, I guess the background for the philosophy, I wanted to make the group project something that was more efficient and more convenient, and increased the sense of interpersonal connection that my students experienced. To do that, I found Google Plus. Google Plus, just as a quick background for those who didn't know, it was created by Google to be basically their version of Facebook. It was their entry into social media. To compete against Facebook, they needed to have something to offer more than this is like Facebook. Everybody's already on Facebook, they already use Facebook. It had to find some sort of way in, an access point to this kind of social realm. They did that by integration, and that's really the strong point of Google+. Google Plus alone is nice, it's useful, but it's the way that it integrates with Gmail, the Google Calendar, and Google Docs that really kind of pushes it, in my mind, as a productivity tool rather than kind of a fun social media sort of thing. The key to Google Plus is the way that it organizes users. Because each user, right, our students will go on here, they'll create their account, they can use existing Gmail accounts if they have them, they can create new Gmail accounts if they wish, and activate Google Plus. They then find each other using their Google Plus, user addresses, their email addresses, and they organize themselves into circles. So if I'm on there, I can just click and drag users that I have found to whatever group I want them in. Anything I share with that group goes only to that group, and it reaches everybody in that group. So it becomes a quick and easy way. It's kind of like the group discussion board in D2L, except for instead of having to create a thread, write it out, and then reply to a thread, it functions once you get in there just like Facebook. You type on somebody's wall, you enter, you type, you share it to a circle, they all get it, and then it threads the feedback, the comments, along with it. We'll see that in action in a little bit. There are three major components of using Google Plus Hangouts. One, asynchronous communication, which is what my students were working with in the classroom. And let me zoom in for those who are having trouble seeing it. There we go. It's big. When they log into Google Plus, on their homepage, just like if you're familiar with Facebook, on a Facebook page, you have a stream. The stream is just anything that's been shared with you recently. So it's chronological. If you are using this for group work, your group circle, anything they share with you, will show up in that stream, along with any comments they've made to it or whatever. So it kind of, again, functions in a way like a discussion board, except instead of having to go in, click a bunch of times to set it up, you go in, you type what you want, you hit enter, and it posts, just like a Facebook comment. However, you can also share Google Docs. And this is something that I wasn't sure how my students would deal with it, because it's a new technology for a lot of them. They weren't so certain they were willing or eager to use this, but once they got going, they really loved making their papers, their group projects, in Google Docs, because one person can create it and then share it using the Google Plus circle right out of Google Docs to all of their group members, who can then go in and edit the document as well. So it functions in a way like a wiki, except for minus having to go into the Campus Pack portal, and then, I guess, into D2L, then through the Campus Pack portal, then to the class, then to the wiki. You simply go to the link that is provided when you share a Google Doc, and then you can start editing right away. It saves all the changes from each user. And unlike something in Campus Pack, one of the limitations I find frustrating is that only one person can edit at a time in Campus Pack. So if a bunch of us are working on something and somebody's in the wiki, and I want to go add something to that page, I can't until they save and exit. But in Google Docs, everybody can edit simultaneously. So you can have one person working on it, another person comes in just on their own schedule. Now they're both in there working on it. They can start talking, or they can wait to organize some synchronous communication. This is another thing that Google Plus offers that I have yet to find replicated effectively anywhere else. And that is audio video conferencing for up to 10 people for free, by the way. Everything in Google Plus, free. So you could do it with Skype if you pay them. You can do it with Adobe Connect if you can get all of your students organized and using it, but then they all have to have the separate rooms in order to have their separate groups. Google Plus provides basically a hangar divided into different segments. All the students go into their own Hangouts, they hang out with each other, only that group sees it, and they can talk back and forth freely. This is something, probably the single most popular component of Google Plus with my students was the synchronous video hangout. Because as they put it, it was like being in a face-to-face class. And that's one thing that I've noticed even in my face-to-face classes. My students work much more effectively and much more efficiently in class than out of class. If I give them a group assignment, if I don't provide time for them to work on it in class, they start to report it's difficult to find time to meet with each other. Emailing back and forth is such a pain. Drafts go back and forth and get lost or changed, and people don't know what they want to do. Having one place where they can sit down outside of class as though they are together, regardless of differences in geography, access to a car. If they have an internet connection wherever they are, they can use this video hangout. It also now supports tablets, smartphones, both in the Android ecosystem and the iPad, the iOS ecosystem, laptops, desktops. If you have something with a camera and an internet connection, basically, you can get online. It's a handy, handy little component. Alongside this, because this part can be controlled, right? Let's say I'm getting on a video hangout. I don't want my peers to see me. I took an online class in part because I don't want people necessarily knowing what I look like or interacting with me in that sort of way. I may not feel comfortable with that. There is an option for each user, just a little toggle, much like we have in Adobe Connect with the mute microphone and show webcam and things like that. They control their level of communication. So if I go in and I don't want to be seen, I can check that video box so it's not going to show my video. I just show up as a box. They can still hear me, but now they can't see me. If I don't want them hearing me, I can uncheck audio. But now I can still instant message with them in a built-in text chat within the Hangout. So you've got audio, you've got video, you've got text, and then finally, they also edit the same document at the same time. So once I have created a document in Google Docs, shared it with my circle, when I have that Hangout and they come into the Hangout, I pull in the document, it shows up for all of them, and all of the people in there can edit at the same time on the same document. So if they divided up the work into segments, they can each be working on their segments, asking questions of each other. Hey, I got stuck on this. What do you think? Let's take a look at this. If they're only making decisions together, they can be testing out different things, different ideas. What about this sentence? Well, what about this version? What about this version? And then discussing it together without having to wait for one person to edit, save, exit, then talk, then edit, save, exit, and then talk. This is mediated by an ability to schedule on the calendar. And this is new, and it's still a little awkward. But given the fact that Google Plus has been around about a year and has already gone from basically a static text Facebook to dynamic Hangouts with up to 10 people, video and audio, give them some time because I think they'll keep working on it. But you can schedule in advance your Hangout. You put it in the calendar, you send an invitation to your circle. All they have to do is click a button in that notice and it adds itself to the calendar. At the pre-appointed time, it invites all of them automatically to the Hangout. They pile in and you're off and running. So it takes even one additional step of actually having to sort out, okay, who's here, who are waiting on. It just invites everybody and they can then enter as they get the invitation. You can also record your conferences. It records the video, it records the audio, it records the editing. So when you record it, it then uploads to YouTube, which you can control the settings on to make sure that it stays private, right? You can still have it unlisted or even set as private, and then just share the video with your group members. This is useful for group members who may not be there. Much like we'll be doing today, I have multiple emails in my inbox saying, I want to be here, I'm busy, I've got other appointments, I can't make it, but I'd like to know what happened. I'd like to know the content that was delivered. With Google Plus, that's what students can do. They can meet, they can talk, they can edit, and then they can record it and share that with anybody who wasn't there. Those students then, for whatever reason who couldn't be there, can go watch the video, see, listen to, watch the edits, read the edits, and then continue to edit asynchronously because the Google Doc sharing doesn't go away. So even after we're all done editing at the same time, if we leave that document and then later on that night somebody comes up with an idea that they want to put in there, they can go in, access the document, and then continue to edit even on their own. So it offers a lot of flexibility in terms of when they meet, how they meet, and then when they edit. Now this is just kind of the format. We're going to move through this quickly, but I wanted to put it in the presentation so that people who are watching it later could kind of see how I approach using Google+. Because one thing that I was really nervous about, and one thing that my students were actually really nervous about as well, is that this is the unknown for them. Not many students have a ton of experience with Google+. I, at that point, had very little experience with Google+. So I wasn't really certain how it was going to work. And when I am uncertain about something, I tend to err on the side of over-explaining. So I developed a process, a little step-by-step system that I told my students, here's what you should do. Here's the order to do this, to get this up and running. And I thought I would share kind of the fundamental of that system today so that anybody who's looking to replicate its usage in their own classes has a place to start. Basically, students sign up for Google+, and then they create the circle with their group members. And I'll actually show you how quick and easy that is at the end of the presentation. Then you can start communicating right away through threaded discussions. You don't need anybody else to be online. You just type in something, share it with the group, send it along, and it will show up on their page. And it shows up instantly, just like instant messaging would. As soon as I hit enter, Google servers pick it up, post it to the right people, and they can see it right away. Then they can start responding and commenting, and then eventually we can schedule synchronous meetings through the calendar. So one of us will create an event, put it in the calendar, send the invitations, they'll go to everybody, at the right time, everybody will get an invitation to the Hangout, and then they can join up and meet. After that's been established, a student creates a document in Google Docs and shares it using the exact same circle. So all this is kind of repeating the same fundamental process of setting something up, sharing it, setting something up, sharing it. The first time, it can be confusing for students. And I did get a bunch of emails the first time around. I'm missing group member so-and-so. The rest of us are there, but this person hasn't posted yet that they're there. They didn't give us their name. We can't find them. It did take a little bit of doing to get this moving. Much like any group process, especially online, where somebody's missing or somebody didn't post what they were supposed to post or didn't tell the group what they were going to do. Once they ran through it once, I never had another question about how to make Google Plus work. It is very intuitive. If you're new to it and it's intimidating, then it can take a little bit, but once you're familiar with it, it is quick and it is easy. So students finally meet together. They're sitting there, they're chatting, video, audio, a vaguely sort of coffee shop atmosphere without the coffee. Well, I guess you could do your own coffee. You're at home. Why not? Knock yourself out. They meet, they edit, and then they record the meeting, and again, they share it. That's one of the important parts. Nobody has to miss anything. So all group members can continue to be effective even if they don't make it to the meeting. They can catch back up on their own time. So for our students, especially online, who may be a couple time zones away or overseas, that may be very difficult for them to schedule a synchronous meeting. But they can watch this video at their own convenience and then attempt to get in touch with one or two other group members who may be able to meet. They don't all have to meet at once. So you can have different subgroupings within the group, meeting, recording, and then sharing with the other members who weren't part of that subgroup. It keeps communication open and it keeps it consistent. And that's one thing that I noticed really helped. The more often I could get my students to talk to each other about the group projects, the better they tended to do. If it was one kind of everybody comes in, slams through it, put it up, okay, phew, that's over, we don't have to worry about this anymore, not so great. But if I could keep them talking and interacting, then they were more familiar with each other, they responded better to each other, they connected better with each other, and they produced better work because there was just more information being exchanged between them. Once it's recorded and saved, that becomes a thread in the stream. It pops up right on their homepage, and they can then comment on it like they would anything else that was shared as a thread. So if I type something and share it, they can comment on it. If I record a video and share it, they can comment on that. So if I miss a meeting, I go in, I watch the recorded video, I have an idea, I can type that right in underneath the video, and now that is being tracked as a single thread as well. Communication keeps going, synchronous and asynchronous. Student feedback is encouraging. This will get bigger, don't worry about it. I took a survey after this because I tend to be nervous about how these different technologies will affect my students, and I want to get that feedback as often as quickly as possible. So I took a survey. I had informal email conversations with students about how things were going, particularly those who asked me initially about how do we work this, I don't understand. I followed up with them later. Okay, did you still have these issues? Is everything sorted out? What could be improved? What went wrong? And then the final part of their group project is actually a reflective paper on the process. So most of these are actually taken from the reflective paper. A couple are taken from actual questions. But for the most part, anything that mentioned Google Plus came up on its own. A lot of students gave unrequested feedback just as part of their discussing the group project. So here's what kind of things we kind of came up with. The first one I think is pretty typical, the first sentence at least. I don't know about the hat off to Professor Bowden part, but this first part is pretty typical of responses that my students have to group work, both online and in class. Skepticism. Immediate skepticism, dislike, rejection in the more vehement cases. They're not big fans of working in groups, especially because I'm a wizard at timing, as so many emails telling me people can't make it right now have taught me. I also timed my first trial run with Google Plus with the D2L transition, because why not? Why? Utter upheaval. I took everything familiar out from under my students. I felt bad about it, but it actually turned out to be very useful. So the important part, I think, is down toward the bottom of this first quote, that being able to see and interact with a one-stop atmosphere sort of thing. They go in and it's all there. They don't have to pull up D2L, talk on the discussion boards, then open Microsoft Office and type, and then go back to the discussion boards, and then Microsoft Office, and then wait, D2L email not yet there. Instead, everything's there. Everything's contained. Also, the communication appears as if we are in a face-to-face class. And I did ask a couple students who had mentioned face-to-face class what they meant about that, and they meant the actual class session. So it even trumps my in-class class in their outside time, because it's like being there, sitting at a table with your group, making these decisions as you go. The second one was one of the unrequested. This was just from one of the reflective papers. I like the slightly easier. I wasn't sure about that. That made me a little anxious. But I think the rest of the comment kind of bears out that this was useful. Once they set up a time, by the way, this happened before the calendar feature. So scheduling was actually a lot more difficult when this was instituted. Once they were able to set up a time, that time was more productive because of Google+. The fact that everyone can see each other and talk in real time makes it a great asset to group projects. The next one speaks to Google Docs editing. Editing the same document at the same time or whenever they wanted. Again, that convenience, that flexibility to work around their schedules, which works both particularly for online classes, but also, again, for in-class courses where the students might not be able to do all their group work in the classroom session. There's other stuff that you probably have to do. You may have only so much time you can dedicate to having them work in their groups in a supervised situation. Google Plus is an amazing tool, and I plan on using much more of it and learning from it. Now, one thing that I loved about this was one class. I only tested this in one class because I figured if it went horribly wrong, I could intervene in one class much more easily than I could in 5. My students in this one class, despite their initial concern and confusion, ended up running with Google Plus in ways that I never really expected. So a lot of what I've come up with today is actually due in part to things they were doing without my ever thinking that they would come up with them on their own. Some of the things like recording and sharing the meetings was something that one of my students just decided with their group they should try because there were only a couple of them there and a bunch missing. They recorded it and they reported back to me, this really worked. You know, it let the students get caught up. We didn't have to explain everything to them. It kept everybody on the right page. Google Plus for group chats. Again, that's the threaded asynchronous conversation. Being able to share documents through the chat, forwarding chat conversations and documents to whomever could not make the chat session was easier through Google+. The ability to talk through video gives you a real meeting type of feeling. And again, that's one of those things that led to greater interpersonal connection with the groups, which, and I'm going to kind of jump off the trodden path here, but I'm going to make an assertion that I think will be borne out, that students who feel greater interpersonal connection with their groups perform better because there's more on the line. They feel that people are relying on them. They don't want to let those people down because they feel like they know them now. It's not a faceless name in a discussion board. It's someone they've spoken with. It keeps them in the class longer. My attrition rate in this class was almost 0. Is it because of Google+? I can't make that statement. But it was lower than the other 106 class I taught, same subject, that didn't use Google+. I feel like it keeps them involved in the group project at the very least, particularly since my group project tends to hit a little later in the semester when things are getting extra crazy. The last one I put in a little different font because that was maybe the greatest testimonial I could have imagined, is that a student, this is another one that came out of the reflective paper, this was not requested about Google Plus in particular, that they were telling their friends in other classes who were working on group projects to use this. They were sharing it with their friends, saying, this is something that I tried in this class, it worked out really well for us, why don't you try it for your projects as well? Now, concerns. Is that a question? Oh. That's a great question. So Google Plus and Google Docs are integrated because mostly the sharing, you can create a document, and when you go to share it, if you've ever created a Google Doc before, when you share permissions, it sends a little email. You used to have to know that person's email address anytime you wanted to add them to the document. But now that it's integrated with Google Plus, it will auto-select people. You can share it with the entire group just by starting to type in the name of that group. And Google Plus will fill it in and say, do you want these people? You click on it, It fills it in for you, you click save, and it notifies all of them. You've got this doc you can now edit. The other way is through the Hangouts, because when I'm actually in a Hangout, as I'll be demonstrating momentarily, you can actually pull a document that you've shared in, and everybody edits it, and it's just like being in Google Docs, except for you're framed with video conferencing, chat, whatever it is that you've decided to pull in. So that's how they kind of work together currently. Will that continue to change and evolve? Possibly. Google seems to be intent on continuing that integration, so there may be a time when Google Docs is simply a collaborative editing tool built in, where you would just go there and you would pull up your documents like you normally would without even having to share them. It would simply be a shared space for the group, something kind of like Dropbox. That is purely conjecture, though. I don't know at this point if that's planned or not. Did that answer your question? Great. Thank you for asking it. So possible concerns. With any technology, there are concerns. And even though I generally am super excited about trying out new technologies, trying to find ways I can use them, you do have to think very carefully about what are the trade-offs of this. One is the learning curve. That one I think is relatively minimal just for my students. If you provide support documents, it helps a lot. And again, when I am concerned about something, I tend to over-support. So I have an entire document, how to sign up for Google+, a document, how to create your circle in Google+, a document, how to create a Hangout in Google+. And they can just use those as they wish. It's just a little link. They pull it up as they need them. They don't have to have it in every single module. They just access it when they want. Data security. Boy, that really doesn't show up well on the dark background. I apologize. Data security. Google is about as secure as data can be, I think. The problem is it's been hacked once. So there is that concern about data security. Are other governments really going to be interested in what our students are doing for our group projects? Probably not. But it is still a concern. You should always be nervous about your students' data. Is it secure? Is it safe? Is it private or personal? One of the things I think that mitigates this for me is that they can create their own account, and only the information they put in is actually there for Google to use. Google also just approved, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, aliases. Google used to insist that you had your real name in there. People didn't like that. They don't want to sign up necessarily with their real name. Now they can do aliases. So you can actually you can create an account, put in a different name if you want to have nobody able to track you through this, and then work from there. The only people who really need to know, myself and the group members. Other than that, it's nobody's business. Access and control. Whenever you are putting all of your eggs in a single basket, I think there is concern there about access and control. Is that a question?
Yeah, Lisa Pauline was curious if there are issues with downloading on campus.
Do you mean downloading what? The documents themselves after they're shared? Or downloading, there is a plugin required. If you don't have admin rights to your computer, as we found out at the in-service, then that can be an issue, but it is luckily quickly and easily solved. Yes, the plugin, if they were using a computer lab on campus to do a video hangout, there would be a download issue. My recommendation would be don't use a public computer lab for video hangout anyway, just because you're going to have the sound on, you'll need headphones, you'll need a microphone, you'll still be talking. It's not necessarily the best etiquette. Are there quiet rooms, does anybody know, at the library for the different campuses or at some of the computer labs where people can go and sit alone? Oh, okay. Okay, so they'd have to bring their own hardware. Yeah. So I would be more than happy, though, to lead some sort of push for getting that plugin installed on our computers, because I like it, and I think our students can use it. So we'll talk, Lise. We'll mull that over. And then finally, accessibility. Strangely enough, accessibility is one of the lesser concerns that I had because of how Google handles video. Google auto captions video. So the fact that my students are going into Google Plus Hangouts, doing audio video conferencing, and then uploading it, in terms of getting, for hearing impaired students, access to that, Google allows you to you just click caption, and it will run the captions for you. They're not perfect. They were nowhere near perfect, but they're getting better. I don't know if it's because I say a lot, or if I have kind of garbled speech going. But when I first started putting my videos up on Google and using them for captioning, it was rough. I've learned some lessons. Google's learned some lessons. We're meeting in the middle now, and it's getting better. So accessibility is working. It's getting there. It's still a work in progress, but I suspect it will remain a work in progress for all sorts of platforms for quite some time. As for the Google Doc itself, to go the other way, text-to-speech works just fine with Google Docs. So they can still play it, hear it, just like they would any other document. Some future possibilities. I started getting, this wasn't originally part of the presentation, but I started to get all fired up about Google Plus while I was talking about it, writing this thing out. I thought, why not? Let's look at some of these little strangely drawn clouds and see where we might go from here. One thing that I've started dabbling with, though I have not had anybody show up yet, I've only been offering it for a couple weeks, drop-in video office hours. Takes a little more planning. My hair's long, I have a scraggly beard, I haven't shaved, all too recently. Can be rough. I have to sit there in front of a camera and make sure that I look presentable as a human being. But the upside is my students can drop in just like they were in my office. Given that I teach at Midtown right now, that's useful for me because I hold my office hours at Midtown because that's where my students are. But my online students might want to come in and meet with me, but they can't make the drive to Midtown, or they only know how to get to Harrisburg campus, or they might not be anywhere near Harrisburg in general. Now they can do a video hangout with me, show up, we talk just like a video chat in Skype, except for instead of having one-to-one, I can now have entire groups come in and meet with me. Student conferences. Student wants to meet with me, comes in, meets, we talk, they get these ideas that they're excited about. They leave the office, and if they're anything like me, as they take each passing step further away from the office, they start to forget some of the things that we had just talked about. This was awful for me when I was a student. I would go in and meet with a professor about a paper or an idea for a topic or something in general, and I would leave thinking I am going to go home and just crank this out and it's going to be great, and I'd get home and I'd schedule another meeting because I forgot much of what I wanted to do, forgot how I wanted to phrase things. Recorded student conference that can then be shared only with that student. It stays private. They're the only ones who can find it. They're the only ones who can see it. But it records everything we talked about. They can then go in and rewatch this later at their own time, pull up their document, and then edit from there. And then I have a deep and enduring love of video feedback on papers. And I'm always looking at ways that I might be able to make it more effective and more efficient. The whole recording, editing, compiling, uploading, it's a lot of steps, takes a lot of time. As a result, I can't do video feedback as often as I would like. I have not tested this yet, but I figure since we're already up here in the clouds, why not go for it? Possibly doing Hangouts with video feedback, pulling up student documents in a Hangout, either by myself, editing them, commenting on them, allowing students to see what I'm doing as they hear me narrate it, or even better, see if I can get students to come in to the Hangout. Bring them in to edit their paper. Talk the paper over with them while I provide feedback. They can then take that whole recording and have access to it later. So that's the presentation. Are there any questions before we dig into the Google Plus itself? Yeah?
What do you do if you have more than 10 students trying to simultaneously chat or video conference?
That's a great question. Like, the question was, what do you do if you have more than 10 students who want to video conference at one time? My answer is a shrug. That one I have not found. I would guess maybe Adobe Connect. I'm not sure how many Adobe Connect would support at once, but if you're going to have that size group all at the same time, that might be better. If not all of them need to video conference, a Google Plus Hangout supports 10 videos, but thousands of attendees. So if only some of them needed to have access to video and others wanted to comment in the chat or whatever, with audio. Well, I don't know, let me rephrase that. With audio for the people who have video. I don't know about audio without video. I have not tested that one, but it'd be worth looking into. Probably in that case, I would guess not the most effective tool to go with, but might be worth exploring.
Have you used this for department meetings? Because we have a problem here at this college getting access to audiovisual conferencing rooms.
Right.
Have you tried this with your department? Or?
I have not. I have tried it with one meeting that was a smaller group, and my microphone on my hack-provided laptop was broken, so it did not work. But they were there. They were there. They came in. They've had no trouble getting there. In terms of larger scale meetings, I don't think it's there yet, unless you're having presentations. So if you have people doing reports, department meetings where certain groups are doing reports, and other people might be able to type in text, then it could work. But if you're really looking for that huge scale, probably not going to be effective. However, one solution, a strange little workaround that I actually discovered in Adobe Connect at the virtual campus faculty meeting, you can get a bunch of people together in a classroom, any classroom with internet access, with a computer, and then pivot for the video. And if you can get 6 campuses or 5 campuses or however many campuses you have, one setup for each, now you're back in business with video for each one, just like in our multi-conference rooms, except for instead of who's that in the back, you just turn it and they're right there in front of the camera. A possibility. A lot of it's going to be workaround at this point, but hopefully I'd love to see something like that in the future.
I haven't used it for my classes, but we used it for our fantasy football draft.
Yes, another option. Fantasy football draft. Very good.
But there were 10 of us, and it kept freezing, the videos, and I'm wondering, I was just curious if you think that was, if you've used it for groups of 10 before, and if it's that common, does it tend to slow down or freeze if you've got more students trying to use video?
That is a good question.
People that had to go without video.
Yes, my guess, not to shame you and your technology, it was only difficult for 2 out of the 10. Once one of them, I'm not naming names, once one of them dropped, the others didn't have issues anymore. So, but it raises a very good point about hardware dependence. If you have somebody who's on a really stuttery connection, they will definitely have a poor experience, and it may result in others having a less optimal experience as well. So maybe that person should look into a new tablet, like a Galaxy Nexus 7 or something. Just a guess. Any other questions? Yes.
One of the things I'd like to really point out is what the actual, they quite possibly are basing what they're doing on the dynamics of conversation. And if you think about what's happening in the classroom as we sat here, Jason's been lecturing, we've answered questions. There's one focal point of attention in this room. Right now it's me, but as you go around, as each person talks, that's really the only video feed that they need to provide a similar dynamic to what we're capturing. So the limit of 10, I don't know that it necessarily matters. And other previous, we did teleconferences all the time, and the video that we shared was always the screen. Because if I was working with people, in California or Germany, what was on the screen was important for what we were sharing. So I don't know. Every time you add another video feed to it, it's so incredibly data intensive and so much bandwidth is being used that we'll come up with some way to pick people up.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. My students took it upon themselves to troubleshoot much of this as well. So some of them would be on text only because they understood that their machines weren't managing the video well. Other groups might be all video all the time because they were all accessing it from a computer which could handle that. And also in terms of the single focal point, I think Forrest raises a fantastic point. Google Plus, when one person's talking, that person's feed moves to the center, and gets bigger. So it really does, it promotes a single focal point at a time, which I think helps promote in the minds of students a little more organization in the discussions. If somebody's talking, they're front and center. If a bunch of people are talking, you've got chaos anyway. And so having that one person kind of rotating turns, whoever's speaking, helps, I think, conduct a more orderly meeting as well.
You may have covered this, I'm sorry, but can you do screen sharing instead of video with Google Plus, or no? Like, can they all look at the same thing and then talk, or?
That's a great question. I can't remember if I've tried screen sharing with Google Plus or not. I have not tried it recently, if so, because I don't really remember. But absolutely something to look into. We can try it when we get the little fake hangout going in a minute.
Have any of your students used it on different types of devices, where they've connected on a tablet or on another type of device?
I don't know about my students. I have.
Okay.
I've tested it only on Android and PC devices, because that's all I happen to have access to. But I've used it on my phone, on a tablet, and on my computers, both desktop and laptop. And I would say that the experience from worst to best is in that order. The phone, it's tiny, but the app for the phone is optimized for the phone. So you actually don't get 10 videos on the phone. You get only that big video of the person talking at that time. So it will switch, but you can't really see. You start to lose some of that nonverbal communication with some of the others if they're, nodding their heads. You can't see that kind of, unspoken agreement.
Possibility for somebody to join if they're not at a desktop.
Oh yes.
Using their laptop.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and they can still participate. I would probably personally use it as a as necessary only sort of thing. I wouldn't personally choose my phone over my tablet or my desktop, but it's there and it works. And I only had a 3G connection, so it was whatever they're doing. It was processing the video sufficiently over 3G, which was a little surprising. Any other questions? All right, well, if you come up with any, feel free to toss them out. Let's take a quick look at Google Plus itself and how we get it set up, the different interfaces and things like that. So let me pull this down. All right, this is my Google Plus page. You can see over here, these are all different menu options over on the left. We'll get to some of those as we go. The center is my feed. The most recent post is from Jason Bowden, asking me if I've started my presentation for Thursday and suggesting that maybe we want to start working on that. He is wise, very wise indeed. When I have something shared with me, it shows up with this little counter over here. So if I click on it, it reminds me, okay, something new has come in. I can then click on it if I want, or I can ignore it, and it goes back to 0. So if you have students who are posting, all they have to do is go to their Google Plus page, and it will tell them if things have been shared specifically with them. The reason that's a 1 instead of however many things are going to show up on my stream is that that one was shared specifically with me. Others are shared publicly, and I just subscribe to them. So it's a great way to share resources with other students. If they want to do a link, let's say, let's pretend that this is a resource that I want to share. I can click, it drops down a reply box for me. I paste it, I post it, and it adds the link itself. So they don't have to go in, they don't have to copy a link, they have to insert a link, they just paste the address and it handles the link. If I share it, then it posts not only the link, but it also pulls up a little preview of the page and a description from the metadata. Again, Google, its roots are in search. So it has a lot of money invested in indexing and understanding metadata for these pages. That can help students understand what they're looking at when this random link comes across, because now they can see, okay, this is what this does, or this is what this page identifies itself as, before they just kind of jump in and try to figure it out on their own. Now, I can share this with anybody that I name. So I can type in the name of users, I can type in circles, but before we get to that, well, I guess, why not? We're already here. If I click in here, it pulls up automatically a list. I can do all my circles, I can make it public, I can do extended circles, which I define as, close circles plus some other circles. I've got friends and family, acquaintances, people I'm following. These are kind of just public announcements, things like that. Students who have contacted me on Google+, former students who have contacted me on Google+, because I do a lot of maintenance. Right? I don't want my circles, I don't want to be posting things for classes in circles that have former students, only current students. I want to keep it relevant. You can manage your circles at any time, and it's as easy literally as dragging and dropping, as we'll see in a second. Faculty members, group leaders. So let's say I wanted to share this with group leaders. I click on it, and it pulls that right into the little address bar. That's just a placeholder. Google knows who's in it. It doesn't list all the names, just like in our address books. If you choose one of the groups, you only get the group name, not rather the individual names. I can also email them if it's urgent. I need them to see it. Their email may push, right? They may have push notifications or filters built into their email to send it to wherever they're most likely to check. I can email them as well to make sure that gets through. I'm not going to bother because my group leaders, I believe, are Mick and Amy. Surprise! You remember those weird cryptic things I was sharing with you guys during the in-service? That's how. I click share, and it pops up. Oh, here we go. Matt Harris has shared something with me. 5 scientific reasons a zombie apocalypse could actually happen. And again, you'll see my 0 counter has gone now to 1. And it's that fast. Matt types it in, sends it, and there it is. Thank you, Matt. I'll have to go read that after. Now, to get the circles set up, there's this little button here called Circles. This does a number of things. It pulls up people that you already have in Circles. There are people who have you in Circles, and there's an option to find people. So if you're looking for different individuals, you can go to Find People and type in their address. These are all people that I already know. Let's say I want to add Jason Bowden, since he was so concerned about this presentation today, to my group leaders group. You can see down here in my group leaders group, there's Amy. Come back. There's Mick. If I want to remove one of them, just drag, Mick's gone. But now I feel bad, so let's put her right back in there. While we're at it, let's bring Jason in as well. And that's it. You can just compile your group like that. They're all in this. Anything I share with that group now goes to all of them. As you mouse over any given group, it tells you who's in it. If you mouse over a person, it tells you by highlighting what circles they're already in. So it helps you track and manage your contacts. These contacts, by the way, are also in my Gmail. If I want to send email to these people, I can just start typing in their username, just literally their name, their display name, and I can send them an email without needing the actual email address. It's in Google Docs sharing. It's in YouTube sharing. It's fully integrated now so that no matter where I want to share, I can use these groups and these individuals as contact points for that. Now let's say, all right, we've got everything, the circle made, it's all good. I can share things with them as we've already done. But now let's say that I want to get into setting up a Hangout for the future. This is still, like I said before, the most awkward part, but it's also very new. So given time, I suspect they'll streamline it. You would think that you would do scheduling a Hangout from the Hangout. But no. Instead, you have to use events. Again, you can tell by the introducing, big shiny new feature. When you go to create an event, oh wow, there's a little tour that you can take if you want. We're going to skip it though. You can give it a name, group meeting. You can give it a date and a time. You can give it a location if you wanted to set up a meeting to actually go to meet in person, but you don't have to. Additional details, or in this case, are options. If you click event options and then, sadly, again, somewhat unwieldy, hidden under advanced, you can make this an online only event. So let me select that. And then I'm going to share this with my group leaders. I type in G, it pulls up everything relevant that matches that. I select it, and I invite. And now it's off. at that time, right, you're in. 7 o'clock. so, so yes, your email address is now preserved for posterity, by the way. Uh, but that going back to access and control, I mean that is a possible concern to bear in mind. If people are sharing information, that gets recorded and that is shared, and somebody out there has access to that. So we can set up our meeting, and let's say we're just going to jump ahead to 7 o'clock tonight to starting a Hangout. You can do that from your Hangout down here, or you can go over here and just click Start a Hangout. It loads up a screen that allows you to invite people. You can invite groups just like we did before. If I type in, I'm not going to type in group leaders because I'm going to do it a different way, but if I typed in group leaders, it would bring up the same thing. I click on it, they pop in. I can also go over here with all these nice little pictures of people and just click it. And now Jason Bowden's going to be invited to this Hangout. You can name it if you want. The Awesome Hangout of Awesome. We can enable Hangouts on air. That's what records it and allows it to be shared. So they have to decide to do this in advance. But once they do this the first time, it's very difficult to forget. It's just this little checkbox. I'm going to skip the sharing or the recording to share part, and I'm just going to go for a classic Hangout. That now invites Jason Bowden. Oops, let me get the right one here. There we go. So now Jason has to load the Hangout and join the Hangout. And now, ooh, this is scary. So now, this one is me. Right? I don't have a webcam on this computer. And this one, ooh, weirding me out up here. Don't try this at home. I feel like reality is about to just collapse in on itself up here. This one over here is the Jason that I invited. He has video. I can then go in here to Google Drive, which is where all my Google Docs are, select the document I want to share, and pull it in to the Hangout. I can now edit this. And, oops, if I can get back here. So can I, he, us. You'll notice that it shows up with a little pink cursor. On this screen, there's a little green cursor. The green cursor is Prof. Bowden. The pink cursor is Jason Bowden. And it shows those different cursors as you edit. So you can keep track of where the different group members are as they're editing. Keeps people straight a little bit to some extent. It's always going to be kind of confusing when you have up to 10 people all editing the same document at the same time. Color's probably not going to be the most effective. But it's there. It's just one more little thing. When we leave this Hangout, these changes are saved. So anything we do here, we don't have to remember, Control S or whatever. Just when people exit, document is restashed. From that point, anybody who's got access to it, both of us, can now go in there and continue to edit asynchronously until the next time we meet, and then we can edit synchronously again. And that's pretty much it. That's Google+. That's how my students now do most of their group work. Yes?
Now, if you save this and then bring it up again, does that color coding stay there so that you know who added those?
That's a great question.
Comments?
Let's check it out. Let me exit. And now I'll start a new one. Oh, just click. Back to the Hangout. This time, I'm not sure that I can handle video. So now, that's my video on this. I toggled it off so that people wouldn't see me. That's what they see instead. The reason that it's still taking up all the screen is that my microphone on this works again. So now it's picking up my voice as I'm speaking into this microphone on my laptop, pushing this box front and center. Let's go back to Drive. You can also create shared notes and things like that. There are all sorts of tools that I haven't really played around with fully yet. Bring that in. And let's see what became of those edits. Looks like no, the color coding is gone. So you will have to, now what my students have done, I suspect, to compensate for this, I wasn't sure until just now, but I did have a number of students report that they used some of the different commenting features to leave little notes when they edited things. I changed this, or I went in and did this, or what do you think about doing this? So there are ways around that, but it would be nice if it would kind of do markup as they went.
Can everybody pick a color and actually change the color?
Yeah, they could. I mean, anything you can do. You know, if you wanted to do a different color background or a different color text or a different font or a different font size or a different style, absolutely. Just like in Microsoft Office. Anything you can do there for the most part, you can do here as well.
Now, when you go back to look at that, do you have to go back to the Hangout, or can you just pull up
Nope,
the doc?
you can just pull up the doc.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So, and when you share it, you can share a link to it in an email. So they could go in through Google Drive. It would show up in their Google Docs area. Or they could go in through the email that you sent when you shared it and just click that link and it will pull them right back up to the document that they have sharing for. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have one more. Everybody has to create one of those home pages.
Everybody needs a Google Plus account. The homepage itself self-populates. So they just create they activate Google Plus,
Right.
and the homepage for them is already there.
If you have a Gmail email address,
Yep.
is that a Google account? Or do you have to
Yes,
create
that is a Google account. Google Plus is opt-in, so you would have to go to plus.google.com. The link is in the Adobe Connect version, which will be recorded and then shared online. But you would go to the Google Plus site, and if you're signed into your Gmail account already, there's just a button that says Activate Google Plus. You click it, and you're up and running.
Does that work for our students then with their Hawkmail, because that's supported by Gmail?
No, yet. It works. It works for Google Apps for Education. Right? There is a version of Google Plus that is part of the Google Apps for Education suite that works with Google Apps for Education email, which is what we have. The email is free, so which is why we have it for our students, I suspect. The Apps for Education, not free. So to get the full suite, you have to kind of buy in to the larger Google account. At first, I thought that this was a big drag because I thought, how great would it be if our students that we're encouraging to use Hawkmail anyway could just use Hawkmail for this? But the more I think about it, the more being able to control their own information, I think, is more and more valuable. I'm not sure what kind of information comes attached to those Google email addresses. So when they create a Google Plus for education, I don't know what Google's getting, how much Google information Google's pulling out of their email to use in advertising on Google Plus, because that's how Google makes their money. So it's a pro and a con in a way. The convenience would be great, particularly since in the new version of D2L, you can use Google Docs if you have Google Apps for Education to submit your work to the Dropbox. So our students could literally do all of their work in a Hangout on Google Docs and then just submit their assignment right from there. You wouldn't have to download it and upload it. You wouldn't have to save it or upload it to the Dropbox. You could just move it over to the Dropbox and submit it. Or more likely, you'd go to D2L and grab it, and D2L would pull it in. So nice and handy, but again, only for the full Apps for Education. We'll see. We'll see where that ends up. Other questions? Any questions online? Yes, I agree, Diane. The Hawkmail in Google Docs is very similar as well. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate all of you who attended.